Erica and Charlie Kirk heard about these curses, and that news genuinely rattled Erica in particular. She knew Christian teaching on this subject. She loved Charlie, absolutely.
I've seen Erica Kirk in real life at church since Charlie died, and I will tell you that the performance in real life is as bad as it is on TV. I'm talking reserved front row pew, bringing her whole entourage, not her children, showing up late, dabbing her eyes when she walks back from communion because it's the one time that the...
Imagine losing everything. Your reputation, your credibility, your community, and then instead of retreating, you decide to build something new. But what if that new thing isn't just about rebuilding, but about power, control, and hidden motives? This is the story of Erica Kirk, the woman who went from being embraced by her church to launching her own religious empire. The question is, why, and what's really driving her? Stick around, because by the end of this story, you'll have more questions than answers, and I'll be diving into the darkest corners of what really happened. The footage, when it emerged, was undeniably damning. It was no longer a question of rumors or speculation. This was hard evidence. The tapes allegedly contained timestamps and visible faces, giving the public no room to question or deny its authenticity. The content, once private, had become a viral sensation, spreading with shocking speed across the internet. People who had once revered Erica now watched in disbelief, as her private life was laid bare for the world to see. It didn't matter that she had dedicated her life to preaching redemption and purity. In the face of such raw exposure, those words now rang hollow. For Erica, the fallout was swift and brutal. The church leadership, once a pillar of support in her life, now turned their back on her. They locked her out, severed all ties, and made it clear she was no longer welcome in the community she had once called home. The rejection was not just from the institution, but from the very faith she had spent years building her identity around. The sanctity of the church, which had once provided solace, now stood as a cold and unforgiving fortress, leaving Erica to face the consequences of her past alone. But instead of retreating into the shadows, as many expected, Erica made a move that stunned everyone. Rather than slinking away in shame, she allegedly claimed that she was being persecuted, positioning herself as a martyr in the eyes of her supporters. She flipped the narrative, making herself the victim of a great injustice. She began to spin a story of betrayal and abandonment, painting the church's actions as an attack on her faith and on the path she had chosen. But this was only the beginning of her bold plans. In the wake of her ousting, Erica made an announcement that would send shockwaves through the public. She was going to create her own church, a new place of worship, a community that would embrace her vision of faith without the restrictions of the old. This declaration took the world by surprise. It was not just a spiritual move, it was a statement of power. In a single stroke, Erica was reclaiming control over her destiny, severing ties with the institution that had rejected her, and establishing a new space where she could lead. Suddenly, the focus shifted. People no longer questioned her departure from the church. Instead, they began to wonder if her new church was a genuine pursuit of faith, or if it was merely a way to recapture the control she had lost. Was this about redemption, or was it about Erica trying to rebuild her empire, unrestrained by the confines of a system that no longer served her? The question of her motives became more complex when people started to reflect on Erica's history with the church. The Catholic community had always been a central part of her life, especially during the most challenging moments. When Charlie passed away, the Catholic community rallied around her. They stood by her in full force, offering prayers and support in a time of immense grief. There were images circulating of Erica and her family visiting the National Basilica in Washington, D.C., showing their solidarity. Masses were held for her, and entire congregations prayed for the Kirk family. At that time, it seemed that Erica was firmly embraced by the church, that she was safe within its comforting fold. But now, in the wake of the tapes, that embrace had become a cold and unyielding rejection. As the public grappled with this shocking turn of events, attention inevitably turned to the deeper questions about Erica's past. Long before the footage surfaced, whispers had been circulating about her. Some had always suspected that Erica's pristine image was just that, an image. It wasn't just the tapes that people began to scrutinize, it was her entire public persona. One particular video, a provocative country music video featuring Erica in a highly sexualized role, resurfaced and sent waves through the media. This video, which had been buried for years, seemed to be the antithesis of everything Erica had come to represent in the eyes of her followers. It painted a picture of a woman far removed from the pious, devout image she had worked so hard to cultivate. But it didn't end there. Another video from Bravo's summer house surfaced, showing Erica in a completely different light. In this footage, Erica was seen partying, drinking excessively, and dating multiple men. It was a stark contrast to the image of strict discipline and religious devotion she later claimed to have adopted. It was as though two completely different versions of Erica were colliding, the public persona she had carefully constructed, and the woman from her past that she had tried so hard to bury. These videos didn't just contradict her current image, they explained why she had been so determined to distance herself from that past. To many, it seemed like a desperate attempt to reinvent herself, to shed the skin of a life she now deemed unworthy of her faith. The resurfacing of these clips served as a reminder that Erica's fall from grace was not sudden, nor was it a result of a single mistake. It was the culmination of a series of events, a series of choices she had made in the past that had finally caught up with her. But what truly left people questioning her decisions was the announcement of her new church. Why, after being cast out of the institution that had been such a central part of her life, would she choose to create a new religious entity? Was this truly about a spiritual calling, or was it about Erica regaining the power she had lost? The answer to that question seemed to lie in Erica's long-standing dissatisfaction with the traditional structure of the church. Throughout her life, she had been vocal about her frustration with the Catholic Church, particularly its hierarchical structure. She had often criticized the idea of intermediaries between herself and God, believing that the church had placed unnecessary barriers between her and her faith. For Erica, the saints, the priests, and the sacraments were not necessary. She believed that her relationship with Christ should be direct and unmediated. This view had been a cornerstone of her departure from the church, and it now seemed to be the driving force behind the creation of her new church. But what raised eyebrows was her sudden and harsh critique of her Catholic upbringing, especially considering the immense support the church had shown her during her most vulnerable moments. Erica had always spoken about the importance of faith, but now, when the church had offered its hand, she was turning her back on it. Was this new church about faith, or was it a calculated move to build a new power structure, one that Erica could control without interference? As Erica's new religious entity began to take shape, so did the questions surrounding it. She began to flood her social media with scripture-heavy posts and Bible verses, framing herself not just as a woman of faith, but as someone who could teach others. Her podcast, Midweek Rise Up, took on an increasingly instructional tone, positioning her as a spiritual leader, someone who could guide others on their journey of faith. It felt as though she were preparing for something much larger, a role far beyond that of just a participant in her faith community. To many, her new church was not a surprising development. It was the natural conclusion to a journey that had been unfolding in plain sight for years. But as Erica's new church plans took shape, so too did the rumors. Was this new religious entity really about faith, or was it a way for Erica to shield herself from something darker? Speculation began to grow, with many comparing Erica's plans to those of other controversial figures who had used religion as a front. Could Erica's new church serve as a means of protecting her finances, or her reputation? The allegations surrounding her previous orphanage, Romanian Angels, loomed large over the conversation. The project had been fraught with accusations, including claims that children had been moved without proper documentation. This only deepened the suspicion that Erica's new church might not be about faith at all. It might be a way to protect herself from further scrutiny. As the questions mounted, so did the stakes. Erica wasn't just creating a new church, she was building a new structure of power. The concern wasn't just about the teachings she would offer, but about the infrastructure she was creating and the people it would protect. Was this about faith, or was it about control? Was Erica truly seeking redemption, or was she trying to shield herself from the consequences of her past? In the end, Erica wasn't just exiled from her church. She had lost the very institution that had given her credibility. And now, as she set out to create her own power structure, she faced the challenge of rebuilding her reputation on her own terms. As the public began to question her motives and her rush to create this new organization, the real question emerged. Why was she in such a hurry? Why was she so determined to replace the power she had lost? The public may never know the full truth, but one thing was clear. Erica was doubling down. She wasn't backing down. And that made people wonder, what was she really after? The church's leadership, after thoroughly reviewing the footage, wasted no time in severing all ties with Erica. What had once been a cherished and unshakable connection was now reduced to a liability, one that the institution could no longer defend. They wasted no time locking her out, barring her from returning, and making it unmistakably clear that she was no longer welcome within the sacred walls she had once inhabited. For many, this swift and decisive action was justified. The church, after all, had a reputation to uphold, and the truth of the footage left no room for ambiguity. But instead of quietly retreating, as most had expected, Erica did the unthinkable. Rather than accepting her fate, she flipped the narrative entirely. Instead of retreating into silence or shame, Erica allegedly took a bold step and proclaimed that she was the victim in this story, that it was she who had been persecuted. She positioned herself as the one wronged, claiming that the church, in its moment of crisis, had turned its back on her. This was the ultimate twist. The woman who had once stood before the congregation with a message of redemption and salvation now painted herself as a martyr in the eyes of her followers. She shifted the focus from her alleged transgressions to a story of abandonment, painting the church's actions as an unjust betrayal. This was not just a defense of herself, it was a calculated move to regain the narrative. She was no longer the one cast out, she was the one wronged. This audacious pivot not only shocked her followers but made her supporters rally behind her even more fervently. In one fell swoop, Erica had redefined the story, and in doing so, she had taken the first steps toward rebuilding her future. Then, as if the dust hadn't settled, Erica made a move that stunned the world. She publicly announced plans to launch her very own church, a place where she could lead, a place that would embrace her vision of faith, free from the constraints of her former institution. This was a bold declaration of independence. No longer would she be bound by the expectations of the Catholic Church. She was carving out a new path, one where she would be in control, unencumbered by the restrictions and judgments of those who had once supported her. The question on everyone's mind wasn't why Erica had been cast out, but rather what this new church would mean for her future. Was this the beginning of a new chapter in her faith journey? Or was this simply a strategic move to reclaim the power and control she had lost in the fallout from the scandal? The world was watching, and the stakes were higher than ever before. For those who had known Erica, this move was hard to reconcile. How could someone who had once been such a central figure within the church, someone who had been embraced by the community, so easily be cast aside? It was hard to fathom that the church, which had been a pillar in Erica's life for so long, would sever ties with her so decisively. The church had been more than a religious institution to Erica. It had been her anchor, especially during the darkest periods of her life. When tragedy struck, when Charlie passed away, the church had stood by her. They offered their prayers, their support, and their solidarity. The Catholic community had embraced her and her family during their time of grief, and the images of Erica and her loved ones visiting the National Basilica in Washington, D.C., served as a testament to that bond. It seemed for a time that the church had fully embraced her, flaws and all. She was a part of their community, and they had shown her love when she had needed it most. The prayers of the congregation were a reflection of the faith they had in her, and they had lifted her up when she was at her lowest. But all of that changed when the tapes surfaced. That delicate bond, forged through years of support and mutual trust, was irreparably shattered. The church that had once provided her with comfort and protection now became the institution that cast her aside, no longer able or willing to stand by her. The support she had once felt so secure in now seemed like a distant memory. Erica, who had once been at the center of the community, now found herself exiled, alone, and vulnerable, with only the very people who had followed her as a support system. It was a devastating fall from grace, a sharp contrast to the unity and protection she had once enjoyed within the church. The fallout from the tapes was swift, but it wasn't just the footage itself that caused the rift. It was the culmination of years of scrutiny and secrets, of a past that had always lurked beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to surface. And when it did, there was no going back. The church couldn't ignore the evidence, and the public could no longer overlook the contradictions in Erica's carefully curated image. The very institution that had once been her refuge was now the one to sever ties, leaving Erica to find a new path, one that she would have to forge on her own. Her decision to start her own church was without a doubt an audacious one. It was a declaration of independence, but it was also a reflection of Erica's belief that she could create something better, something more aligned with her own values. The question, however, was whether this new church would truly be about spiritual growth, or whether it was simply a way for Erica to regain the power and control she had lost in the wake of her public scandal. The world was watching, waiting to see how Erica would navigate this new chapter in her life. and whether she could rebuild her reputation on her own terms. Before the tapes were made public, whispers had already begun to circulate about Erica's past. Rumors that, though never fully substantiated, had always lingered in the corners of social media and gossip circles, waiting for their moment to be exposed. These weren't mere idle tales. They were pieces of a hidden history that many had speculated about for years. Then, like a bombshell, a provocative country music video resurfaced, showing Erica in a highly sexualized role that starkly contradicted the devout, disciplined woman she had spent so long cultivating as her public persona. The video seemed like a relic from another life, one that Erica had worked tirelessly to bury and distance herself from. But that was only the beginning. As if that weren't enough, more footage emerged, this time from Bravo's Summer House, a reality TV show. In these clips, Erica was seen partying late into the night, drinking heavily and engaging in a string of casual relationships with multiple men. This wasn't the image of spiritual discipline she had so meticulously crafted in recent years. There were no signs of the piety or devotion she now claimed to have embraced. Instead, there was a carefree, almost reckless version of herself, a stark contrast to the woman who now preached the virtues of faith and strict self-control. For many, these videos were the confirmation they had long suspected. Erica's image of being a devout, disciplined woman of faith had been a facade, one carefully constructed to hide a much different, wilder side of her. The public's eyes were suddenly opened to a truth that had been veiled for years. The woman who had preached about faith, purity, and redemption was now revealed to be someone who had once lived a very different life. The contrast was jarring, and for her critics, these videos were the proof they had been waiting for. Erica had spent years running from this past, trying to erase it from her life and her public image. But now, that very past had come back to haunt her. These stark reminders of her past, moments captured on film, moments that Erica had fought so hard to bury, clashed violently with the image she had spent so long constructing. The disciplined, pious, and devout Erica Kirk now seemed almost like a fictional character, a persona carefully crafted for public consumption. The woman who had stood before her congregation, speaking about her unwavering faith and commitment, was suddenly exposed as someone with a history that didn't align with those ideals. It wasn't just a discrepancy between public and private life. It was a collision of two entirely different worlds, and it was impossible for Erica to reconcile them. For many, it made sense why she had distanced herself so fiercely from that former life. She had to distance herself from the chaos and contradictions it represented. And then, when the church made the decision to remove her from its fold, it almost felt like a foregone conclusion. The videos had made it impossible for them to stand by her any longer, and once the tapes were out in the open, there was no going back. Her fall from grace seemed inevitable, as if it had been written in the stars all along. The very institution that had once embraced her had now been forced to reject her. The community that had rallied around her in her darkest hours now turned its back on her. In the eyes of many, Erica's removal from the church was not just a consequence of her actions. It was a final chapter in a story that had been building for years. But what really left people questioning was her response to this rejection. Instead of retreating into the shadows, instead of taking time to reflect or to step away, Erica made a bold and unexpected decision. She announced plans to launch her own church. This wasn't just a spiritual pursuit. It was a dramatic pivot, a declaration of independence that raised more questions than answers. Why, after everything that had happened, would Erica want to create a new institution? Why abandon the church that had once been a central part of her life, especially when it had supported her during her most vulnerable moments? Why not work to rebuild the broken relationship with the Catholic faith she had once known so well? The answer, in part, could be found in Erica's long-standing dissatisfaction with the structure of the church itself. For years, Erica had spoken about her frustration with the traditional barriers she believed existed between herself and God. She had always felt that the Catholic Church's structure, its priests, its saints, its sacraments, created unnecessary intermediaries between her and her faith. For Erica, these elements of the church were not guiding forces but obstacles, barriers that prevented her from experiencing a direct and unmediated relationship with Christ. She often expressed the belief that the church had become more of a hindrance than a help, a bureaucracy that she no longer wished to be a part of. So, in launching her own church, Erica was not just distancing herself from the past or the scandal that had rocked her life. She was actively seeking to break free from the very system she had once been a part of. She was taking the reins of her own spiritual journey, free from the constraints of a religious institution that she no longer believed in. In her new church, Erica would be in control, and the structure would be one that reflected her own vision of faith, one that prioritized direct connection with God, without the need for intermediaries or layers of tradition that, in her view, only served to complicate the process. This move, while bold, also raised suspicions. Was Erica's new church truly about creating a place of spiritual healing and GR? Oath, or was it about something more calculated? Was it about building a community of faith, or was it about crafting a new power structure? One where Erica could once again be in charge, unchallenged and unburdened by the expectations of others. While Erica may have seen this as a spiritual calling, others couldn't help but wonder if it was also a strategic decision, one aimed at regaining control over a life that had been rocked by scandal and rejection. But Erica's sharp critique of her past, particularly the church that had supported her in her darkest times, raised even more questions than answers. Why was she so quick to cast aside the very institution that had been her pillar of strength when she needed it most? After all, the same church that had embraced her during her grief following Charlie's death, that had offered her solace and support, was now the very institution she criticized so vehemently. Why was she rejecting that sanctuary now, especially when it had stood by her when the world seemed to crumble around her? This contradiction didn't sit well with many. Was her new church truly a divine calling, a genuine step towards spiritual leadership, or was it simply a calculated move to regain the control and power she had lost amidst the scandal? As Erica's social media presence evolved, the tone of her messaging became more pronounced. It was no longer just about personal reflection or sharing moments of faith. It had shifted into a full-blown campaign of religious instruction. Bible verses, scripture passages, and teachings from Christian doctrine now flooded her platforms. Gone was the woman simply practicing her faith. Now, Erica was positioning herself as a leader, someone capable of guiding others on their spiritual journeys. Her podcast, Midweek Rise Up, adopted a more instructional, authoritative tone, as though she were preparing for a much larger role in the religious community. The shift was unmistakable. For those who had been following her closely, the announcement of her new church didn't feel like a shocking revelation. It felt like a natural progression of her public persona. She had been inching toward this moment for months, if not years. The seed had been planted, and now it was blooming. However, as Erica's public image was carefully curated, so too was the scrutiny of her past. As the details of her earlier life resurfaced, so did the inevitable questions. People began to look back at every facet of Erica's life, the moments of triumph, the moments of scandal, and everything in between. They re-examined her rise to fame, her personal struggles, and the inconsistencies between her past and present personas. One of the biggest and most pressing questions that emerged from this reevaluation was whether Erica's new church was truly about faith, or if it was a cleverly veiled front for something far more complex, perhaps even sinister. Rumors began to swirl, and suspicions grew. Some began to draw unsettling parallels between Erica's new religious venture and the actions of other controversial public figures. One of the most talked-about comparisons was to Kris Jenner's California Community Church, a church long suspected of being used as a vehicle to quietly funnel money and protect wealthy clients. Was Erica's new church simply another tool for her to regain control, to build a platform for her own personal gain, and to shelter herself and her followers from the scrutiny of the outside world? Was this new church a spiritual haven, or was it, in fact, a cover for something darker, a way to protect her wealth, her power, and perhaps even shield herself from the legal or financial consequences of her past actions? As the rumors swirled and the public skepticism grew, the question became, could Erica's new church really be what it appeared to be? Or was it a calculated move, a well-planned structure designed to fulfill personal and financial motives rather than spiritual ones? The parallels to other high-profile figures who had used religion to shield their actions, were difficult to ignore. The lines between faith and financial gain were often blurred, and now, with Erica in the spotlight, the same questions began to rise once again. Could she be using her own version of faith as a means of creating a new empire, one that was built not on the foundation of trust and community, but on power and influence? As Erica continued to push forward with her plans for the new church, the public's perception of her continued to shift. Some saw her as a visionary, someone who had overcome adversity and was now forging her own path. Others, however, saw her as a master manipulator, using her charisma, her public image, and her ability to captivate an audience to build a new empire that was just as much about control as it was about faith. For many, the truth remained elusive, wrapped in layers of doubt and suspicion, leaving the world to wonder, what was Erica really after? And more important, what would her new church truly stand for in the end? The speculation surrounding Erica only intensified as attention turned to one of the most controversial chapters of her past, her previous orphanage project, Romanian Angels. This initiative, which had once been touted as a philanthropic endeavor, had been marred by allegations of serious misconduct. There were persistent rumors that children had been moved without proper documentation, that the operation had not been as transparent as it seemed. The accusations had never been fully substantiated, but they continued to linger, a dark cloud over Erica's past that was impossible to ignore. And now, with her new church in the works, these unresolved questions resurfaced with a vengeance. Was her new venture truly about faith, about providing a sanctuary for those seeking spiritual growth? Or was it simply another front, this time for something darker, something more dangerous, that she was trying to shield from the public eye? As Erica's new religious entity began to take shape, the stakes became even higher. What had once seemed like a personal spiritual journey had now escalated into a high-profile public project, one with far-reaching implications. The focus was no longer just on her teachings or her personal faith. It was on the infrastructure she was building around it. What was Erica truly after? Was this new church a genuine expression of redemption, a way to rebuild the faith that had once defined her? Or was it something more insidious, a way to construct a power structure that she could control, one that would protect her from the very scrutiny and consequences she had faced in the past? The questions kept piling up, with the public increasingly fixated not just on the message she was preaching, but on the network of influence she was quietly assembling around herself. What was the true purpose of this new venture, and what did it mean for her future? The concern wasn't just about the content of Erica's teachings anymore. It was about the power dynamics she was creating. It was no longer just about what she was saying. It was about who she would become once she had the infrastructure to back her up. The rise of this new religious entity, in the eyes of many, was not just a spiritual undertaking. It was a calculated attempt to reclaim the influence and credibility she had lost when the church expelled her. The question of whether Erica's motivations were truly about spiritual redemption, or whether they were about rebuilding a fortress of influence around herself, was becoming impossible to ignore. In the end, Erica didn't just lose a church. She lost the very institution that had lent her credibility in the eyes of many. The Catholic Church had been a cornerstone of her life, a place where she had once found refuge and meaning. But when she was cast out, she lost the structure that had provided her with the credibility and protection she had long taken for granted. Now, as she sought to establish a new religious entity, Erica was forced to rebuild that credibility from scratch, but this time on her own terms, outside of the traditional religious frameworks that had once defined her. The rush to create this new church, this new structure of power, raised more than just eyebrows, it raised alarms. The public watched, curious and skeptical, as Erica moved forward with her plans. Why the urgency? Why the need to build this new network of influence so quickly, so decisively? Was it truly about faith, or was it about something more? Was it a genuine attempt to rebuild what had been lost, or was it a calculated move to regain the power she had once wielded? Erica wasn't backing down. Despite the doubts, despite the growing criticism and the shadows of her past that continued to follow her, she pressed forward. She was doubling down on her new venture, confident that this was the path she was meant to take. And in doing so, she made it clear. She was not just rebuilding her reputation. She was redefining the rules of the game. Whether it was about faith, power, or something else entirely, Erica was determined to seize control of her future on her own terms. The world, however, was watching closely, waiting to see where her journey would ultimately lead, and whether the foundations she was laying would withstand the scrutiny that was sure to come. So, what do you think? Is Erica really building a new church to help others find redemption, or is there something far darker behind her actions? Do you think she's truly seeking faith, or just trying to regain the control she lost? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because this story isn't over yet, and we'll be diving even deeper into the twists and turns of Erica's journey. Stay tuned for more.